He said that to me after. Okay, Council, we're live now, so if we could have your attention, please. I'd like to welcome everybody who's here in the audience. We'd like to thank our media and broadcasting partners for covering our meeting. Council, there's a letter on each of your desks. That was just a letter that was sent to me, but it's from the Shingwauk Education Trust, inviting me to participate in the Pre-Confederation Treaty Symposium on March 30th. I got a call from the Shingwauk Trust making it clear that they wanted to extend that invitation to all of Council, so they asked that I make sure all of you were aware of it. So we put that letter, Lisa of my office put that letter on all your desks. So this letter is an invitation to all of us. Peter Liepa is not in the chamber right now. It's his last meeting, so we were going to congratulate him, but we'll wait till he gets in here, then congratulate him. With that noted, Mr. Clerk, can you start the meeting, please?
Under Agenda Item 1, adoption of minutes, a motion, I'll use another courtesy mover. Motion by Councillors Nero and Turco, resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting of 2017-03-06 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Under Agenda Item 3, declarations of pecuniary interest.
Councillor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 6.11, 6.15, municipal law enforcement officers, and 7.8.1, Mayor James McIntyre renaming police building, spouse employed by police services.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Under Agenda Item 4, approve agenda as presented. I would note to Council there are a number of additional items on the addendum. In particular, Council, there's the item under 7.8.1. There's an explanatory memo to you on that item. I would like to confirm that item, which concerns the renaming of the police services building, will be tabled. It was unknown to us and quite frankly outside the police community that the building had been dedicated previously when built. We will be going back to the committee to reconvene and find another appropriate recognition opportunity. And I would just like to use this moment to apologize to the McIntyre and Vanini families for an awkward moment. As well, Council, the item on Humane Society bylaws related to animal control 6.11, that will not be dealt with tonight. We therefore have a motion by Councillor Supinen and Nero, resolve that the agenda for the 2017-03-20 City Council meeting and addendum as presented be approved.
All in favor? Councillor Myers?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't here right at the outset. We're going to take a moment on the Canada 150 pin.
Oh, sorry. So
no, it's my fault. I wasn't here at the beginning.
Okay, so the agenda is approved.
Yes.
That's carried. So before we move on, I did indicate to Councillor Myers that she would be able to have a moment to talk about the Canada 150 pin. Okay,
just for the benefit of the viewing public, members of council tonight are being presented with the Sault Ste. Marie Canada 150 pin. It's on their desks. And this is the pin that was designed, obviously the Canada 150 pin was designed, but the option was there to customize it for your community. And Virginia McLeod and Rick Borean and Mark Hazelton and all the staff in the CSD have been certainly moving this along. I think we have sold over 1,000 of these pins, and they're on reorder for another 1,000, and we'll probably be ordering again as we get into the summer and Canada Day. So just so that the public are aware, the pin is available. Thank you for supporting it so far, and there'll be a media release when the inventory has been replenished. So the Sault Ste. Marie Canada 150 pin, quite colorful and attractive, and thank you to our staff for the work on it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Myers.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, under agenda item 5.1, Vimy 100th Memorial Days. Major Pierre Breckenridge, the chair of the Battle of Vimy Ridge 100th Commemoration Committee, is in attendance.
Major, would you like to approach the microphone? Do you have my proclamation? Welcome to council, Major, and to the remainder of your delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Major Pierre Breckenridge, as they said, and in attendance I have officers and cadets from the 2310 Army Cadet Corps, members of the Support Committee, and members from Branch 25 Royal Canadian Legion. who also is a veteran. 2310 Army Cadets would like to thank the City of Sault Ste. Marie for your support and interest in our plans to recognize the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge. For the past several years, Army Cadet Corps from coast to coast on April 9th have commemorated the Battle of Vimy Ridge. On April 9th, 1917, despite other nations' previous attempts and against all odds, the Canadians commenced the battle for Vimy Ridge. After 3 days of intense fighting, significant loss of life, tens of thousands wounded, the Canadians took their objective. This marked the first time Canada's divisions fought together under their own command. The Battle of Vimy Ridge is seen by many as the birth of our nation, where we fought together as Canadians, commanded by Canadians from coast to coast. When we commemorate and remember, we acknowledge and thank our military for their service and sacrifice, the price they paid for the freedoms we enjoy today. I would invite members of council and citizens of Sault Ste. Marie to attend our commemoration on the 9th of April, 2017, where we'll parade from the City Hall to the main cenotaph on Queen Street and have a wreath-laying ceremony. I would also invite members of the community and the surrounding areas to visit the Sault Ste. Marie Museum over the next 6 months, starting in April, where we were fortunate enough to be one of only 2 communities in Canada to have the honor of hosting the mobile Vimy display. I think you'll find something of interest there over that period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Major. I have a proclamation. Whereas the battle for Vimy Ridge, April 9th to 12th, 1917, was a major historical milestone and an important first step in Canada's national evolution. And whereas nations are made great by doing great things together, and whereas over 170,000 Canadians took part in the battle, and whereas more than 3,600 Canadians paid the supreme price, and more than 7,000 Canadians were wounded during the fighting, and whereas Canadians achieved what was considered to be an impossible task, primarily under Canadian military leadership, and whereas the success achieved on Vimy Ridge became part of the pattern for all future military achievements in the Great War, and whereas these 4 days of conflict have been called the birth of a nation. Now I, therefore, Christian Provenzano, by virtue of the power vested in me as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2017 to be Vimy 100th Memorial Days in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you, Major.
Under Agenda Item 5.2, International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Danny Krompotich, Coordinator, Sault Ste. Marie and Area Local Immigration Partnership, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Mr. Krompotich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff. I just wanted to briefly go over a series of events that will be occurring tomorrow rather. City Council, staff, students, and the public are invited to a series of events to recognize March 21st, the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Algoma University Student Union, Sault College, the Art Gallery, the Public Library, Sault Community Career Center, and our own local immigration partnership have partnered to develop a series of events to raise awareness and understanding of the issues related to racial discrimination and to celebrate diversity in our community. A unity walk will begin at the courthouse at 11 a.m. and proceed to the Civic Center, where our mayor and other guests will speak. The walk will then continue to the library and the art gallery, where everyone can enjoy some hot chocolate and donuts and also view exhibits at the art gallery. At 2 p.m., Sault College, with the support of the Community Career Center, will have set up various booths in the Common Link area where members of the public can gather more information on minority groups within our community. Beginning at 5 p.m., Algoma University has scheduled a discussion panel on the elimination of racism and discrimination, followed by refreshments and entertainment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Whereas the municipality of Sault Ste. Marie is committed to the belief that equal opportunity and treatment should exist for all people. And whereas the concept of diversity encompasses acceptance and respect and recognizes that each individual is unique, this includes race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical ability, religious belief, political belief, or other ideology. A community that values diversity moves beyond simple tolerance to embracing and celebrating the uniqueness of every individual. And whereas the General Assembly of the United Nations has designated March 21st as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and whereas the elimination of racism and racial discrimination can be accomplished through understanding and respect for the dignity of all people, and is the social and moral responsibility of each person. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Christian Provenzano, do hereby proclaim March 21st, 2017 as International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Under Agenda Item 5.3, Be a Donor Month. Erica Tomlinson Hogan is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Ms. Tomlinson Hogan.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you everyone for having me today. My name is Erica Tomlinson Hogan, and at the age of 21, I donated 70% of my liver to my next door neighbor, Renee Lee, in my hometown of Milton, Ontario. I had no connection to this woman other than we shared a front yard. She is a mother of 2 boys and a wife to Alex Lee. I had known her for just under 2 years when I decided to make the jump and become a living organ donor. You can also be a living donor to those who either need a liver or a kidney. You can become a registered organ donor and donate your eyes, heart, lungs, kidney, liver, skin, and tissues. When I made the decision to start the testing process, I didn't know a lot about organ donation, as it never affected me or anyone around me. I had talked about how I would consider being a registered organ donor, but never took action. Through this remarkable experience of donating a part of me to the perfect stranger, I realized that organ donation is about a second chance at life, not only for the recipient, but for the family. On November 20th, 2013, I didn't just save Renee's life, I saved her family as well. Since her transplant, I have become a strong advocate for organ donation awareness in our community and around the world through social media, magazines, newspapers, TVs, and talk shows. I've shown my scar to the world. Becoming a registered organ donor only takes less than 2 minutes by visiting beadonor.ca with the help of your health card. You may also visit your local Service Ontario offices and they can assist you. Having your driver's license signed is no longer valid. You must register through beadonor.ca. April is known as Organ Donation Awareness Month, and I'm asking that a Be a Donor flag be raised in awareness for those who are waiting on the transplant list that has an average of 1,500 patients, along with those families who are waiting in hope. I challenge those who I meet through this journey to take the time and talk to their families, not about being an organ donor, but talk about registering to be one, be someone's superhero. So once again, I want to thank you for having me here this evening, and please consider to change someone's life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tomlinson Hogan. I'll go to Councillor Butland before I get to the proclamation.
Yes, thanks for being here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you a Sioux resident?
No, I moved here because of a boy. Because of a boy, my husband. I moved. Yeah, I kind of traveled for him. I moved here in July 2015.
So you are.
Oh no, sorry. Now I thought you meant it was I. That was my mistake.
No.
I am now a Sioux resident. I am a proud business owner in our community.
Fantastic. Well,
Councillor Myers wants to know what business you're
Oh, I am the proud owner of the pastry shop, Sault Ste. Marie's only nut-free facility bakery here.
And where is that located?
216 Second Line West, open 6 days a week.
We're giving you a free commercial.
Sorry.
That's great.
April the 6th, that we'd like to see you. The staff at City Hall and all our satellite offices will be having a day, and Sault Ste. Marie is at 45% registration, and it's number 41 out of 177 cities, and we look to improve. It's a tremendous thing that you've done, and we get to talk to a fair number of recipients, but very seldom have a donor. So hopefully you can be here on April 6th.
Well, I sure hope so. I am walking proof that anyone can be an organ donor, and you can do it living, and if not, you can always be a registered organ donor. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So, whereas over 1,500 people in Ontario are on the waiting list for organ transplants, and every 3 days someone in Ontario dies while waiting for a life-saving organ transplant. And whereas in 2016, 607 organ donors saved the lives of 1,302 people through transplant, and nearly 2,400 tissue donors enhanced the lives of thousands more through the gifts of eyes, bone, skin, or heart valves. And whereas research shows the majority of Ontarians support organ and tissue donation, yet just 31% of eligible Ontarians have registered their consent to donate. And whereas families almost always consent to donate organs and tissue when there is evidence of a registered donation decision by loved ones, but in the absence of a registered donation decision, families consent only half of the time. Whereas everyone is a potential organ and tissue donor regardless of age, one donor can save up to 8 lives through organ donation and may enhance up to 75 other lives through tissue donation. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim and pronounce the month of April 2017 as Be a Donor Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and encourage all citizens to register their consent to organ and tissue donation at beadonor.ca. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance. Yeah. So we have Mr. Liepa here in the chamber. Peter, I understand this is your last meeting. Imagine that. So we want to
30 years is a long time.
30 years. So we want to thank you for being a very capable tax collector for the last 30 years.
Thank you.
And for your service to the municipality. And we want to wish you the best in your retirement.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
So after 30 years, you're going to get a $3 pin, Mr. Liepa.
Well, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, that's better than nothing.
Oh, here we go.
Here you are, Peter. I took it from Councillor Butland. I'll get it.
Oh, thank you very much.
We'll get you another one, Steve.
Thank you.
We can proceed, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think Councillor Schumer.
Claimed pecuniary interest.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
It's 6.13, the Downtown Community Improvement Plan. The proponent is a client of the law firm at which I work.
Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker has declared a pecuniary interest on 6.13. The proponent is a client of his law firm. That's recorded, Councillor Shoemaker. So we are on the consent agenda, Council. So matters on the consent agenda. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at 6.5.
Okay.
The
Canadian Tire and Home Depot minutes of settlement?
Home Depot minutes of settlement. I guess my question will go to
Peter or Shelley?
Yeah. Boy, you're finishing all my sentences. I'm slow today. I guess when I was reading this, a little concerned, as I think most of us are, because the bottom line is we're seeing a major reduction here. But I have a couple of questions. The first one relates to the other communities that were involved in this process. There was a note in here that said that there were other northern communities. I'm just wondering if you can highlight who they were and if they experienced similar reductions. Was there a correlation between the reduction we saw and similar reductions in those communities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the other, especially Northern Ontario municipalities, Sudbury, North Bay, Thunder Bay, ourselves, Timmins, all saw a reduction. I don't know how much of a reduction compared to us, but I know for one example with Espanola, they're very concerned, even though their impact is not as great as ours, but as you know, Espanola is a much smaller municipality, the impact is much greater for them.
No, thank you. The reductions that we saw, they were based on the three parameters that are identified in the report: depreciation, replacement costs, et cetera. Is that how the decision was made?
Yes, that is correct. In the case of the Canadian Tire store, previously it was assessed by income approach, which categorized it as a commercial shopping center. Now, the Canadian Tire store is not part of the Cambrian Mall. It is owned by corporate Canadian Tire.
Right.
So basically, the gist of how they handle these appeals, they centralize these appeals as per request from the Assessment Review Board. So they throw all these box stores into one pot. They'll pull one store out of the province as the sample or base store, and then use that store as a plus or minus depending on where you're located, land value, and so on. Now, in the case of Home Depot and Canadian Tire, as part of that, they accelerated the physical depreciation going forward. They also assessed it based on replacement cost new and adjusted the land value.
Okay. Walmart, it says in here that Walmart was dropped, or they're no longer part of this or up for consideration. Could you explain why it is? What's the behind the Walmart being dropped, the appeal locally?
Walmart, a few years back when they added the grocery section to that store, did appeal, and at that time they did receive a modest reduction. Based on the Canadian Tire and Home Depot appeals, they felt, looking at the numbers in the assessments, especially locally, and I think across Northern Ontario, that they just decided to withdraw the appeal. It wasn't worth the effort to continue.
Thanks. A couple more questions, if you can indulge me. The first one is, are we? Is this a trend now? Is this something that's happened before, or is this a new trend where we've got box stores coming forward asking for tax appeals?
This is the norm. This is how the process is being, when it comes to appeals. When it comes to similar box stores in Ontario, it wasn't like the old days where the local assessor would, defend the assessment of that local store. It's all put into, as I indicated, into one pot, and every store is treated the same way.
Okay, so it's safe to say then that this is a process that as a community we're going to continue to face as other box stores appeal. Is that a fair statement?
The existing box stores, I should mention, as a result of these appeals, their assessments also reflected the change for the 17 tax year going forward. So the new reassessment that we just went through has also reflected these. So we shouldn't see any appeals again on Canadian Tire or Home Depot stores. Yes, that you're correct in the fact that if another store is built, but I would have to say that if that store is built, they probably would use the parameters of the Canadian Tire or Home Depot as their, Impact would as their guide, so they're to avoid an appeal.
Just so I'm clear, and I'm not saying that this is just using the name, but say a Lowe's, could they do the same thing? Could Michael's do the same thing? Are we susceptible that way?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Christian, speaking of Lowe's, yes, they have appealed. And they've appealed as a result of the vacant area that was occupied previously by Zellers and the improvements that they had put to that area. Yes, they have filed an appeal under the section of the Assessment Act.
So it's concerning because our industrial tax base has been eroded, and when we have these appeals, this is another example of, or another source of potential tax reduction, which makes life in the Sioux difficult.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Councillor Christian. It's a revenue reduction, and I had an interesting question posed to me on Facebook where someone said, how do our taxes go up if you've removed a service or a service has gone down?
Well,
One of the things that would drive taxes up is a decrease in revenue, and these reassessments and our revenue dropping is a challenge in that respect.
Yeah, and when we see it, I mean, we've seen it already in the industrial base. This is, without making excuses, it's a fact of life, and it makes it difficult to maintain services and still not have to raise taxes.
With less money. So Councillor Myers? Anybody on this item? Councillor Hollingsworth, you were on this item. Go ahead, please, on this item, Frank.
Thank you. I read the report, and I know that the staff is suggesting that we do not go ahead with the appeal, and just because of the past history. But just out of curiosity, I know that's your recommendation, but have you heard of any other municipalities thinking or are going to be doing an appeal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Hollingsworth, no. And the reason for that is, again, at the request of the Assessment Review Board, they decided to go down this road and to handle these appeals. With that, the MPAC and the taxpayer, which will be Canadian Tire and Home Depot, signed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. That question was asked by one of our Northern Ontario counterparts, said that if we don't sign these minutes, what's going to happen? Well, you can stand in front of the Assessment Review Board. They basically gave their blessing to this process. You won't, so for municipalities, for the most part, when it comes to these type of agreements and stuff, even though we do have a municipal working group, it's almost like we're the outside, looking in. So.
And one other question. I'm not sure if this goes to Councillor Turkle, being our AMO representative. I'm under the impression that has AMO been involved with this? Is there anything else that AMO can do?
As I mentioned, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, at a couple of meetings ago about AMO, we have a number of files. Certainly, this is not one item that I have seen, but I can certainly bring it forward at the next meeting, which is in a couple of weeks, actually. Okay.
Thank you, and I just want to end by saying it is disappointing when these big boxes, like Canadian Tire keeps saying, they give it back to the community, and now we're unfortunately struggling with less revenue. Thank you.
Councillor Fada.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my questions was already answered. Just so I'm clear, Peter, for both sides on this appeal, were there lawyers involved, or was it strictly MPAC that was representing Sault Ste. Marie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fada, there were lawyers involved on the MPAC side and on the taxpayer side. There were tax agents, there were municipalities, staff involved in these discussions.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor. This is one of those areas where, as a municipality, we are pretty much at the mercy of the system, because we do pay MPAC in excess of $800,000 a year to service our assessment needs, and sometimes it would seem frustrating, because I think back to the St. Mary's paper appeal, where we got hit pretty hard as far as what happened there, and it ended up being reduced on a technicality that I think was even more frustrating because of that process, which again is out of our control. So I certainly hope that as far as our relationship with MPAC, I would certainly hope that we would stay in close ties with them, because I think how they operate as a separate entity and how they service our needs plays a big part in terms of our tax base. And it's something that we should really be clear about as far as being in close contact with them. I think Peter Lipa has been very good for that in the past, where he stays very closely in touch with the reps over at MPAC, and that's very important for us, because items like this can really hurt us as far as the assessments being affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on 6.5? See nobody else in 6.5? Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Councillor Christian, do you have more on the consent
Yes.
agenda?
6.9, fire service vehicle purchases.
Go ahead, Councillor Christian.
Through you to our fire chief. I'm looking here at the report, and I guess my question is, can you explain why it was purchased over lease and why we went new as opposed to pre-owned? And the reason why I asked that is because originally we were looking at purchasing 5 vehicles, and we're coming away with 4 vehicles, and yet we're still over budget. And the comment here is that it's a better value, and I'm just struggling with that. So I'm sure there's an explanation, but I'm just wondering if you could provide that information.
Through Mayor Provenzano to Councillor Christian. Originally, we wanted to purchase pre-owned,
right,
based on what had gone on in the past. When we went out to the market to see what was out there, there was not a lot of good value on the pre-owned side. And when we crunched the numbers, if you look over a 10 to 12 year period, it's going to cost about $120,000 more to buy pre-owned versus buying new, based on the fact that we're buying a 3 to 4 year old used vehicle. It has a 7 to 8 year lifespan, so we're only getting 3 to 4 more years out of it. Whereas if we buy new based on technology today, we're getting 8 to 10, possibly 12 years. So if you do a format from now until 2027, we're looking at spending another $120,000 to replace the same vehicles in that time frame by buying used versus buying new.
I'm struggling with a vehicle that's 3 years old that only has the ability to last 7 years, and then a car that's 3 years newer has the ability to last 12 years.
When we get a vehicle, a brand new vehicle, we can maintain it right from the beginning. When you get a used, both based on the body and the mechanical, we can't assume the care of it up until we received it. That's been the past based on the fleet. When I first got here, we had to take 4 vehicles off the road because of that reason.
Okay. Now these vehicles are they're used in the they're used to conduct business here in Sault Ste. Marie. These vehicles stay in Sault Ste. Marie?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, they're pool vehicles mainly used in Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay.
And then for example, they're used outside of the city when we would travel on business with the city. Their vehicles, although used by individuals, are not assigned to an individual. They're pooled vehicles. For example, of all the vehicles you have, I've used every assigned to the pool. 6
and pooled vehicles, there's certain vehicles that serve a specific purpose depending on, for instance, you might have a vehicle a truck that you will use to transport equipment, whereas a car, you wouldn't use it for that. So certain vehicles are assigned specific duties, although they're part of the pool.
Yes, for example, we have smaller compact vehicles that are used for strictly meetings.
Okay.
We have crossovers and compact SUVs for transporting medium-sized goods, presentation packages, monitoring equipment in smaller cases, and then we have pickup trucks, obviously, for the heavy-duty stuff that we have to transport.
Thank you. One last question. So now that if this is approved, does that fulfill our needs in terms of vehicle purchases over the foreseeable future?
At this point, yes, it does. We have one more in the pool that will probably last us 3 or 4 more years.
Okay. So there's, as far as you could tell at this point, for the next few years, we seem to have our vehicle.
This should get us into an asset management plan moving forward, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Fire Chief. So just a couple of questions. At this point, the previous discussion was talking about the big box stores, and basically the city of Sault Ste. Marie approximately could be seeing a reduction in the revenue of over $1 million. So understanding that you need these vehicles, so here are my questions. Out of the vehicles that you are asking for, are these going to be used 90% of the time throughout the week? I mean, the trucks, I understand for the heavy equipment, but for the smaller vehicles, for your trainers and so forth, did you look at any other alternatives where you might have given staff members a car allowance to use their vehicles instead of purchasing?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we looked at that, but the vehicles that are being used are to transport materials, large presentation cases, equipment cases. They need to be secured properly, and all these vehicles will be retrofitted with special brackets and bindings to hold this stuff in place. We can't put that kind of stuff in personal vehicles. On the occasion where we've had a situation where we've run out of vehicles and there's strictly a meeting, yes, we use personal vehicles.
So the two smaller cars, Kia, I think, was one example. You're going to retrofit the small car for these special presentation materials?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, retrofitting simply they have to have special brackets put in. There's existing places in the vehicles to attach the brackets. It's similar to car seats. You have already a knob in the vehicle to attach a car seat. This is exactly the same for securing brackets and straps.
Okay, so out of all the vehicles that you are asking for us to consider, in your own professional opinion, knowing that the city is now going to be down in revenue, would you be open-minded to consider re-looking at this to maybe possibly reducing the number of vehicles you require?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, at this point, we've gone through that analysis, and we're still going to have 16 people sharing 12 vehicles. So we have some redundancy already in the system, but I'm concerned if we go any lower, we're not going to be able to conduct business as required.
Okay, and just one last comment. I understand about the retrofitting, but based on other businesses, knowing that I personally believe that there's another solution instead of buying all these 5 new vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the fire chief. Any consideration regarding leasing vehicles?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, yes, we looked at the leasing as well. The down payment plus the buyback would be actually more expensive than buying new.
Okay. I guess a comment to you. How did you get by up to now with the less vehicles, and now you want to increase it by 4 more? Just curious. Like, I think your mandate is to have 1 vehicle per user, or you're pretty close to that now, if this is passed tonight. How did you get by in the last couple of years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, with the addition of the new staff under the realignment, that's increased the numbers. So we're still, as I mentioned earlier, we're still at a ratio of 16 users to 12 vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kompotic.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and to the fire chief. Just a question, you mentioned earlier that brand new vehicles and maintenance from the beginning are pretty important to us, probably may result in cost savings. So is the ongoing maintenance of these vehicles, is that going to be monitored and recorded?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kompotic. Yes, we're looking at some other software as well, which will help us delineate moving forward on the long term, but from the very beginning, we'll be maintaining these vehicles on our own as well, including rust proofing and oil to maintain the bodies.
Okay, and just one more question. So all the fueling and the maintenance costs with these vehicles will be recorded?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kompotic. Yes, they're recorded through the maintenance log, that mechanical division.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question, though. Are you going to be using any of these vehicles yourself?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Compadre. As I mentioned earlier, I use all the vehicles based on what's available.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's, through you to the fire chief, there's some suggestion in, there's two reports here. The one details the vehicles that this is replacing. It says that the F-250 replaces a current operations vehicle that was deemed not roadworthy. What exactly is it replacing, and who deems it not roadworthy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, it is not, the F-250 is replacing a frontline emergency response vehicle. So it's not our present 2500 double ton and a half is not roadworthy to be an emergency vehicle anymore. So it's going to be rotated out to the mechanical division, and the new 250 will be put into service as a frontline vehicle.
So it's, I'm just trying to understand, it's not roadworthy, but it's still going to be used?
It's, I should better explain through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Roadworthy means it's not roadworthy as an emergency response vehicle on the road. It's still roadworthy to be driven. Sorry, that's my clarification, should have been there. It's being used to haul mechanical stuff from the mechanics division, whereas the new one will be outfitted with regular support vehicle stuff, as well as it'll be frontline for response.
So I wonder if, I don't know if the Hyundai or the Kia smaller vehicles, the XUV or the CUV, are going to be used as emergency management vehicles or emergency response vehicles. Are they?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, no, those will be support vehicles.
So could we not use the one vehicle that's not worthy as a emergency response vehicle as one of those vehicles, if it's still drivable?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, we are using that as in the mechanical division. In 2015, I took a vehicle off the road from the mechanical division, which was unfit. We haven't replaced that, so this one will be to replace that one.
Gotcha. Okay, that clarifies that. There have been, it seems like a couple attempts to ask this question, so I'll be perhaps a bit blunt, and my apologies in advance, but there's some suggestion that you use a fire department vehicle to go back and forth to your residents out of town. Are you going to be using any of these vehicles to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. As I mentioned earlier, I use all the vehicles, so depending on what's available, I may take it, I may not, but I usually grab one of the lesser vehicles.
So one of these is not going specifically to replace a vehicle that you can take back and forth?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Shoemaker, no, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mano.
So my first question, I can see pretty clearly what the number 3 and number 4 in our report are. That's the Ford F-150 and the Ford 250. I'm a little confused when it comes to the Sorento and the Tucson. Based on your earlier indications, maybe you could just help me out again. What are these going to be used for?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Mano. The Sorento is going to be used by our Emergency Management Division. They have presentation packs, they have preparedness packs. That will be going into that vehicle. The Hyundai Tucson, which is considered a compact SUV, will be carrying fire prevention, public education, pamphlets, presentation documents, presentation boxes. These boxes are about 3 feet by 4 feet by 2 feet, all contain self-plastic containers, which move to sites in order to do public education, fire prevention work.
Okay, so let's start with Vehicle 1, the Sorento. These packs you refer to, we're just talking about boxes of documentation in essence, like pamphlets.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilman, I know we're talking about hard plastic case presentation boxes, which both store the presentation materials and are used as an aid during the presentation. I'm not talking about pamphlets and brochures, which are stored in regular cardboard pamphlets.
Okay. But to Councillor Hollingsworth's suggestion, just taking your own personal vehicle and claiming the expense, I don't understand what is difficult about putting a box of this stuff in the back trunk of your vehicle or in the back seat of your vehicle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Manor, we're not talking about cardboard boxes. We're talking about presentation cases, hard plastic presentation cases that don't fit in personal vehicles.
With all due respect, Chief, the Kia Sorento isn't a big vehicle. It's a smaller SUV. It's the size of, anybody out there who has a smaller size SUV, whether it be, a Ford Escape or a Tucson or a Sorento or a Tiguan, and the list goes on and on and on. We all see them regularly on the road. We pretty well have all driven one or been in one. The trunk space isn't much different than one to the back of my Jetta, for instance, or whatever other vehicle. So again, help me why we would need one just to carry some of this information.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, the presentation cases are hard plastic cases. They come in sizes from 4x4 by 2 feet, 4 by 5 by 2 feet, down to 2 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. They're hard plastic cases.
4 by 5 feet?
Squared, 4 by 5 feet squared.
Now, I really don't want to sound crass, but 4 by 5 feet, you're not going to fit that in the back of a Tucson or a Sorento.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor, no, that will go in the pickup truck, that one. Once you put these presentation cases in, you can't put 2 and 3 and 4 of these in one vehicle. A vehicle will carry 1 to 2 of these presentation cases.
I thought the Sorento and the Tucson are only used to carry this emergency management packs for the Sorento and fire prevention pamphlet boxes for the Tucson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, the Sorento carries emergency management equipment and presentation cases. 4 by 4 by 2 preparedness packs, which come in duffel bags, gym type bags. The Hyundai Tucson carries the smaller 2 by 3s, 2 by 2 presentation cases.
Well, one of the issues, it sounds to me like we need to look more into this particular issue. Earlier, when I first asked the question, it was 4 by 3 by 2 for the fire prevention packs going into the Tucson. Now it's 4 by 4 by 2. I think, quite frankly, anything 4 feet wide you're going to find isn't going to fit in the back of either one of those vehicles. I've experienced it with a sheet of drywall. It's not going to go in the back of that, and that's 4 feet wide. So you'll see it. You won't fit anything 4 feet wide into the back of one of those vehicles, whether it's a Sorento or a Tucson. But that's another story. As far as the comments with respect to leasing, I'm curious as to why we wouldn't consider a lease. And I think your indication earlier was the cost of the buyout at the end. And I would tend to agree if the intention is to buy out. But why wouldn't we just look at the pricing on leasing some of these vehicles, however many? Or maybe let me rephrase. Can you look at the price of leasing and come back to us with that?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, when the RFP went out through purchasing, they requested quotations on leasing, pre-owned, and new. And the RFP that came back, the response to the RFP showed that new was the best value based on what was received in the RFP.
Specifically, the question, are you able to get us the pricing point on the leasing and bring that back to us on a further date so that we could at least see those advantages, disadvantages, and make an informed decision?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, I can get that information from purchasing as it was already requested. So yes, I could get that information.
Now, there was some indication of you indicated earlier that because of the realignment and extra staff, we'd be looking at somebody would have to use one of these vehicles. So when you're referring to that, I presume you mean the newly hired fire educator position.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vermont, I'm referring to the 3 additional positions.
And just to be clear, what positions are we referring to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, one of the positions was the Emergency Planning and Research Officer. The other 2 are subject to a grievance, so I cannot discuss them here in open council.
Okay, which one of those positions would be utilizing any of these particular vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, all 3 would be using these vehicles within that pooled setup that we have.
Given the response to the earlier question, some of my questions may get into areas of concern. So perhaps, Chief, before you propose to provide an answer, we could just take direction from our clerk and our mayor with respect to whether or not.
Yeah, I don't have the particulars of the grievances, Councillor Romano, but I do know that a number of the positions have been grieved. So I think staff is really kind of restricted in how they can answer any questions about the positions that you're asking about, because they are part of a grievance process, and we're not involved in that for a reason. So I think we have to be careful when we talk about the specific positions, because administration and the Sault Ste. Marie Professional Firefighter Association, as I understand it, are going through a grievance process that relates to those positions. So I really think that, look, there's listening to all the questions, one of the problems I see is that there seems to be a difficult time understanding, and it's understandable, what these are for, right? So they're pooled vehicle, there's a pool of vehicles, and there's a group of people that use those vehicles. So any questions relating to the size of the pool of vehicles or the necessity of pool of vehicles, or like generally speaking, which positions use the vehicles, I think that's all fine because it stays outside of any labor relations areas.
Perhaps then just I'll seek direction before asking any other questions. If there's a question relating to the tie-in of any of these vehicles to any of these positions which are subject to grievance, and specific to that, the council resolution with respect to realignment and what information we would have known or may have known that these vehicles would have been a necessity as part of those positions.
Well, I don't know how we're going to kind of splice that. Like these are pooled vehicles, and I think all those positions would have access to the vehicles. So it's all going to cross itself over there, Councillor Mann. Okay.
I'll take direction from you, Your Worship.
Yeah, I don't know what you're going to ask, and frankly, again, to be clear, I'm not part of or don't.
No, and I recognize that, but I don't want to delve into something that could be not appropriate at this time. But my question, I guess, specifically, and then we can get a determination if it's appropriate or not, would be, was this process that we'd be getting vehicles for these new positions, is that something that we as a council were privy to or discussed, whether in the realignment decision in October of 15 or the closed session prior to that, leading into our open decision?
Well, I think we can answer that question. I mean, the answer to that's no. I mean, we never at any point discussed the purchase of vehicles. You were there for all those discussions, Councillor Mano. That was never brought to our attention. I don't think we need staff to kind of tell us about what we knew at the time or what we discussed. We never discussed that.
Okay, I'm fine.
So we have Councillor Hupenin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question, my question, I think that the way to go would be leasing. And the reason I think that is we don't have to put the money up front. At the end of the lease, we do not have to buy it out if we don't want to. We can take the vehicle back. That way, we don't have to have the money put up front. And we have leased vehicles. And you can even get pre-owned leased vehicles. So I just don't think it's a good time to be spending all this money. I realize it was passed at council, but it just doesn't sit well with me, Chief. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could perhaps pass to the CFO and treasurer, because some of the questions being raised are relating to purchasing themselves. And the RFP that went out did look at leasing, did look at purchase, and did look at used vehicles. And so perhaps Michelle could explain what the outcome of that process was, as well as where these vehicles were budgeted as part of the capital program.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. The RFP went out, and all three options, as the CAO indicated, were looked at, whether it be used, new, or lease or buy. Once we received the tenders or the RFPs in, they were evaluated from a financial perspective by the finance department to see whether lease or buy was more feasible. And it was and also new versus used was compared to get the best value for our dollar. We also looked at qualitative items, such as the chief has alluded to regarding the repairs, the warranty time that we have on it, the number of kilometers that were on the used ones that we received bids on, etc. So the recommendation that's put forward is the best value for money based on our analysis.
So that analysis was done by finance and purchasing?
Correct.
So Councillor Huppanen is asking me if we can see that analysis. We generally don't see the analysis. I mean, if you want it, it can come here, but just as things commonly occur, we never really see the analysis of the tenders. Staff does the analysis through purchasing and finance, and they bring us a recommendation. So, you know, if what you're asking for is additional information, then what would have to happen is that Council would have to move to postpone this decision and request that staff bring them that additional information.
Thank you.
So Councillor Hollingsworth, thank you.
One other question, and then I have one other comment. Again, going back to knowing that we're going to be losing revenue, I think this question would be more directed towards Al Horseman, our because we're in a financial crunch right now. So from an administrative perspective, from your point of view, what are you doing to basically help to control our costs, knowing that we are going to be losing more revenue from reduced taxes from the big box? Can you just comment on from an administrative point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, on the broader scale corporately, we are, as was described in the 2017 budget deliberations process, going through and we've set targets that we're looking to achieve in 2017, recognizing all of the pressures that have been coming down to bear, not the least of which is assessment shifts, such as that was described earlier in terms of Canadian Tire and Home Depot. We are also looking at 2018 budget and ensuring that we are in a position, given the very difficult period that we're in, to minimize the impact for city departments relating to that budget. I need to remind that half to two-thirds of the tax levy relates to non-city departments. We have encouraged and strongly encouraged that those areas do the similar types of exercises to what we're undertaking. But I can confirm we have this as a regular bi-weekly item with the senior management team, and we go through and look at all of the various options and efforts that have been made to date and are being projected for the future to be able to bring and maintain costs in line with the difficult situations that we're facing as a community.
So if I understand you correctly, this is very much a top priority when you meet with your senior staff. So therefore, I'm assuming that you probably know what other critical projects there are for the rest of this year. Are you looking at prioritizing?
Councilor, we're really getting off the topic at hand.
Okay.
So let's just deal with these four cars. Either let's kind of move ahead with it or not so we can move on. So let's just stay focused on that.
What I'd like to do is pull this, I'd like to pull 6.9 fire service vehicles from the consent.
We're going to pull from the consent agenda because it's evident to me that people are going to want to vote on this.
And can we have a recorded vote as well?
Yeah, we're not there yet, but we can do that. So,
Thank you.
Councilor Nero?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I had just raised my hand because the conversation was going towards the firefighter realignment. When I read the reports, I didn't see a conflict, but it was going that way, but it's gone back.
It's gone back, and we're not going back that way, so you're not
gonna declare.
conflicted. Okay, so thank you, Councilor Nero. Chief, let me ask some questions that maybe will, because I think I understand some of the confusion. So how many pool vehicles did we historically have? How many pool vehicles did the firefighter, or the Sioux Fire Service historically have? Fire and Emergency Management.
Mr. Mayor, at this point, we have 16 people using 9 pooled vehicles.
Okay, so appreciate there's 9 now, but how many have we traditionally had?
We've had traditionally 10 prior to the realignment.
So with these 4, you said it'll be 16 using 12. That's because you're going to take 1 out of the pool.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so there'll be, so you are, Fire Services is increasing the number of vehicles available in the pool to the employees of Fire Services that need them for employment purposes.
Correct.
So making a distinction between the trucks and the non-truck vehicles, are the 2 trucks immediately necessary for operational use? Like, would our firefighters need those trucks to go to respond to a call?
Yes, the F-250 is a requirement for the hazmat trailer, or special operations trailer, and transporting equipment back and forth to the scenes.
Okay,
during emergency.
So we need that vehicle for operational purposes.
Correct.
So that vehicle, if you needed to kind of leave here with a vehicle, well, let me ask you this. Do you need to leave here with all 4 vehicles for the operation of your department, or are there specific vehicles that are central that you need to make sure that you leave here with?
I mean, based on the analysis, we need the 4 in order to maintain that ratio, in order to do the daily business of the department.
Okay, so you're saying all 4 are necessary. But are the trucks, the F-250, kind of, is that more important than, say, the small crossover SUVs?
It's required for the operational business of the department, but the other ones are required in order to do the support role, which are, as we move through, the emphasis on education and prevention are required.
Okay, so Council, I think everybody's had an opportunity to ask questions on this. Go ahead, Councilor Turco.
Sorry, I wasn't going to ask any questions, but since we pulled it. One for you, Mr. Mayor. Are we setting the stage to how this council does business now? By doing this, by having this kind of debate here tonight, discussing tenders and bids?
Well, Councilor Turco, you heard my response to Councilor Hoopin in that if council moved for that information, it would be a deviation from our standard practices. No one moved for it. So, but did this debate get more into the weeds than they usually do on this type of thing? I would think yes, that's correct. It did.
And one to our legal department. I just chatted with her briefly, Nuala. So we have the RFP here. All the bids have come in. It's been advertised now. The people the business who put bids in are aware of what's going on in terms of who got the bids, correct? And is this going to change the process now by us if it fails here tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Turco, as all of council, I think, is aware now from our experience that an RFP is a pretty strict process at law. It's not the same as just asking for quotations or estimates, and we generally are bound by it. If you're varying from the recommendation, we need to go back to square one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Butland.
Yes. Councillor Turco, yes, I think that's where this is going. This is, forgive me, I have some issues with some of the things that are going on, but it's not the leasing or buying of vehicles. This is taking micromanaging to a new level. Say, well, how much will it fit in this vehicle? And oh no, I don't know, that's a problem. And how many are going here? And 16 and 9 and 12. And I mean, to my way of thinking, if you want to really get into the weeds on this, spend a day on site and say, okay, where are all the vehicles and who's using what? But let's not spend an hour saying, again, it's micromanagement to a great level. And
putting this in the same business of impact and assessment, and because of this, we've got to look at this. I don't want to offend anybody, but that's from whence I come. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody's had a turn on this now. We're going to pull it from consent. We'll move on the consent agenda. So, Councillor Christian, do you have anything else since we haven't got farther than you yet?
No, that's some
Well, thank you for that. Councillor Myers, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On to some happy things. Item 6.10, the Splash Park.
Councillor Myers, I'm going to have to stop you. The clerk points out to me that we've gone past 5:30 and I have to move to the planning agenda. So we will pick up with you. So we are on the planning agenda.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, agenda item 7.6.1, A417 OP, Sackville Road Extension. Report of the Director of Planning and Enterprise Services is attached for the consideration of council. And a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Turco resolved that the report of the Director of Planning and Enterprise Services be received and that official plan amendment number 218 concerning the extension of Sackville Road to third line be approved.
Okay, Council, before we start the debate on this motion, I wanted to make a few comments myself and make a suggestion, but I'm not going to move anything as the chair, so it'll be up to you on where we go with this. This project is always, I've always questioned this project, and I've always questioned maybe the necessity of this project and whether this project really is, in the grand kind of scheme of where our community's at, a priority of council. So it's certainly part of our capital budget. It's certainly in our transportation master plan. I want to make it clear that none of my comments should be a reflection of criticism of staff for moving this project forward, because the project was identified through the proper processes, through the transportation master plan, and we have some traffic issues in that area of the city that staff is rightly trying to ameliorate. But when I look at things, and when we look at things we want to do, we often get to them and say, well, we don't have the money. You know, Bay Street, we did an EA on Bay Street that was put off because we didn't have the money. And we have these other things that we want to do, and we have a great feature we want to kind of find some money for our youth and a splash pad, and we have, frankly, some critical roads right now that need attention. We have, I think, as a council, to do a much more thorough job of setting our own priorities. We got the capital budget late last year, and we didn't really have much of a debate about the capital budget. But this is a huge project, and I'm not entirely convinced that we wouldn't be dedicating over $5 million to address a problem that we don't really have. And if it is a problem, I'm not sure it's our most immediate problem. I would frankly think it isn't. And you know, the reality is there are a few times a day where traffic in that area of the city is difficult, but it certainly isn't difficult in the evenings, and it certainly isn't difficult on the weekends. And for those few times a day that it is difficult, I don't think you really have significant traffic issues. So I would think that before this council decides to go down the full road of spending $5 million on building a new road, and that's what we're doing. We're going to add to our inventory. We're going to add to our expense. We're going to have another road to plow and another road to maintain. Before we decide to build a new road, I think we need to have a debate about where we're going to go and what we need to focus on as a council. And I think that debate is natural to happen in the near term, because we shortly will have a report back from the Community Adjustment Committee making some recommendations. And that report will be back here in and around April. And there will be some capital decisions that we might have to make as a result of that. So what I would like to see happen, out of respect for staff and frankly I think what we owe to our community, is I'd like to see us postpone this matter not indefinitely, for just a short period of time, so that we could have that debate about our capital spending. We can have that discussion about what we think as the City Council our priorities are in the capital spending. And once we settle that away, we can determine whether we want to move forward with this project in the near term, or we want to move forward with this project maybe, in the midterm. Because the work's still good, and as far as I understand, the EA doesn't expire immediately. It lasts for a number of years. And this is the only piece of road that's recommended by our transportation master plan. So if we're ever going to build a new piece of road, it's going to be that road, and it's going to be there. My feeling is that traffic isn't the problem this community has right now. And that if we focus too much on doing things the way we've always done things and don't focus on some more immediate discussions, traffic certainly isn't going to be a problem in the future. So I would like to see this council make like a big capital decision like that after we've had more kind of significant discussions about our priorities. And I think we can have those in April, May, and then this decision could follow. So we have lots of hands up. I'm going to go just out of respect for the fact that this is in Councillor Bruni's ward. I'm going to start with Councillor Bruni.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I guess to the planning department, the mayor has stated $5 million. How much is it? What will the city's cost will be for this?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's a question that's better answered by Mr. Ramil is with us tonight.
Sure.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I believe it is in the $5 million range, including engineering and construction.
And that will be coming from the city itself?
Yes.
$5 million. I don't recall in the drawings if there hasn't been any drawings yet for the extension. Am I correct on that?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, no, it is, the drawings are complete. It is actually out to tender right now.
Mm-hmm.
The tender closes April 6th.
Okay.
We do have a full set of drawings.
Yeah. We've spent approximately $100,000 for the study, correct?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we spent $65,000 for the environmental assessment, and we're at around $77,000 for the design this year. So we're sitting around $142,000.
$142,000.
All in.
Well, that money wouldn't be lost because if we delayed this for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, we can still go back and use the environmental study. Am I correct?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, as the mayor indicated, the environmental assessment is what it turns on, and there's a 10-year shelf life on the environmental assessment before we'd have to open that up again and revisit it, which would expire in 2022. As for losses of the $142,000 we've already spent, I mean, we could put it on the shelf, and provided the project was done within the shelf life of the environmental assessment, there wouldn't be major losses.
So it wouldn't be a loss because we can still go back to it if we wanted to do it.
Still use the work. The
Sure.
work's still good work.
Okay, good. There hasn't been any, well, obviously, there hasn't been any public consultation on this, has there? Regarding the extension?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, yes. Through the environmental assessment, we did 2 public open houses.
2?
Notices in the Sault Ste and through the local media.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. I do have comments at the end, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so right now we're on the motion unless somebody moves a postponement of it. So
I'd like to move to postpone it.
So Councillor Bruni, and we'll have a seconder. Councillor Mano had put his hand up really early in this. Sorry, Councillor Hollingsworth. So Mr. Clerk, what do you need further on that?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I've prepared a motion by Councillors Bruni and Romano, resolved that agenda item 7.6.1 be postponed to a future meeting of council.
Okay, so we're just on the postponement now.
Can I comment?
Sure, on the postponement.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was in favor of the postponement, and also I think we should be looking at this maybe in several years down the road. I think with the $5 million that the city has budgeted, I would like to see some of this money directed towards our roads, especially this harsh winter that has occurred. If you drive around our city, there's more potholes than you can imagine. And I know we've reduced some of the PWT's, not potholes, but resurfacing budget. I would like to see some of this money go into that to improve some of our roads, to repair some of our roads.
Yeah, so I think that will have to be another debate, Councillor Bruni. I think staff would have to come back and give us some recommendations in that respect, but we'd have to have that. This is just about not how we're going to spend that money, because we haven't decided not to spend it on this. This is about postponing that.
Okay, so just postpone it then until
Okay.
further. Yeah.
Councillor Romano, and then Myers and Fada.
Thanks for addressing this issue, Mr. Mayor. I think this makes a lot of sense. It had come up in a discussion we had many, many months ago when we were looking at, I believe I was having a healthy debate with our CFO with respect to the potential of debenturing this particular project. But one of the issues that came up there, I just want to clarify, was that there was a fund that had some way been set up for this, and we wouldn't be able to access that, or somehow or another, that was going to cover some $4 odd million. Now,
I think the issue, Councillor Romano, if I recollect it correctly, is that if we don't use our gas tax monies, we have a potential of losing our gas tax monies. So that was the concern, as I remember.
Okay. So can, by postponing this and not doing it, do we lose that funding, or can we apply it to something else in our capital/road reconstruction budget or maintenance budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano. The federal gas tax can be used for more than just roads, as long as we maintain our average of the last 5 years of capital spending, we do not risk losing it. And we can carry forward our gas tax money to another year to use for a larger project.
Okay.
So we could preserve this funding. We'll have to make some decisions. If we decide not to go ahead with this project, we'd have to make some funding decisions in the near term that would preserve this money for the future.
Okay. And sorry to be somewhat redundant here, Mr. Mayor, but to Councillor Bruni's earlier point, and maybe this can go to both our CFO and to you, Mr. Girardi, at budget, yeah, we cut out $870,000 or $873,000 this year, or 820, something in that range, from the road resurfacing and reconstruction.
No, miscellaneous construction.
Yeah, the miscellaneous, and it was road resurfacing. I won't repeat those comments. The potholes speak for themselves. Can we plug that back in on a second motion? Are we capable of doing that? And
He'll take any money you send his way, Councillor Romano. So, but again, we keep on having a conversation about what we're going to do with this money, and we have to focus the conversation on whether or not we're going to postpone that. So let's
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
go ahead, Councillor Shoemaker.
On a motion to postpone, isn't there a speaker in favor and a speaker against, and then?
Yeah, we're going a little far here. I was being, because there's lots, everybody wanted to speak on this, and I was being generous.
Generous?
Yeah.
Not so generous, Mr. Mayor.
We'll take some, I'm happy to not be as generous. We'll have somebody speak against it. Anybody speak against it? All in favor? Carried. So the matter's postponed. So the folks that were here to speak to it, the reason why we did the postponement first was because if it was going to proceed, you would have a right to speak to it. Since it's not going to proceed, we won't be affording that. But when it does come back here, if it's coming back here for a decision, you will be given a right to speak to it. Okay, so Mr. Clerk, we can move on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we can move back to the consent agenda.
So we're back on the consent agenda.
I believe Councillor Myers was up.
Yeah, we were with you, Councillor Myers.
I was in favor of the postponement, just for the record. I was next up to speak.
Let's get on the consent agenda, Councillor Myers.
Okay, well, we were. Okay, Splash Park.
Okay.
Virginia McLeod is here, so I believe she'll probably be taking the questions. If we can just take a moment, if you would, please, through Mr. Mayor to Ms. McLeod. There were a couple of sites looked at for the Splash Park. There's one recommendation from staff, but could you just take a moment and highlight some of the reasons why the committee has selected and recommended Bellevue Park?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. We did take a close look at two locations, Clerk Park as well as Bellevue Park. Some of the factors that we consider when taking a look at these locations is proximity to other services, so which sites already have staff located at them, what supporting services are available at those sites. We also looked at parking, the distance to bring in the requirements to install that infrastructure, which included the water, the electrical, and the sewer. We looked at the site footprint and the impact on the site, as well as security, access to bus routes. We also examined the demographics of the site, and also one of the other things considered was the concession services and that other supporting infrastructure.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can continue. The resolution that I had put forward to Councillor Christian that asked for this report back talked about the project costs. We've got that. The funding sources, I think that you've referred to that in the report, but I'll come back to that in a moment. The location, which you've just dealt with. I want to talk a bit about the timelines, because in your report you mentioned that the timelines for the shovel in the ground, which is what we were looking for, are really dependent upon the success of the fundraising, I think. Is that what your report is saying? And I think it's really critical that we try to find out from you, and perhaps through the Deputy CAO of Community Enterprise, Mr. Bear, is how you're going to approach these funding sources. If you've got them identified, I know that there's $25,000 that's referred to already. And I believe there's some fundraising that's gone on in the community that's close to another $25,000. I'm really concerned about how we're going to do the fundraising piece, because obviously that's critical. And we did identify this as a Canada 150 project that we'd really like to see started this year. And I guess we're starting it tonight, but shovel in the ground would be great. So can you take a few moments through you or Mr. Bear to describe how we're going to tackle this fundraising piece? $575,000 I think has been identified.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. There is a fair amount of we're going to have to really look at having that funding plan. It's going to be a multifaceted approach. So we're going to be reaching out to a number of our local partners. We have some fabulous partners in the community that I do believe there's interest in this project. So we'll be reaching out to those service organizations and potential partners. With that money, so the $25,000 that's set aside, some of the fundraising efforts that were already done through the hockey tournament, we'll be able to hopefully start to leverage some of the grants that are out there. Ontario Trillium Foundation application is due this October. So again, we need to be looking at that application. That could provide up to $150,000. There's also an Aviva Community Fund, which takes place in September. That one is voting based. So hopefully, if we have the go-ahead to proceed with this project, we can start to build up momentum in the community to get the community behind the project and start the voting process. That could provide up to another $100,000. We've also been researching a number of smaller grants, environmental grants. So depending on how we choose to address the water, there's different methods. We could potentially apply to those funds as well. So we'll be looking at reaching out to the community, potential donors, as well as applying for grants over the next several months.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, and you know, because I've spoken with you about this, Mr. Mayor, I'm really concerned. I've got certainly experience in trying to apply for grants and things. I know through my own career work, but other initiatives of council over the years. It's a lot of work, and I really want to know, probably from our Deputy CAO, how he sees us being able to achieve this. I feel that there's a lot of grant writing involved. We've just heard about several rhymed off, and we have regular duties that our staff are attending to, and we're already, I think, short from our former complement in that department. So through you, Mr. Mayor, could I ask our Deputy CAO of Community Enterprise how he sees who's going to lead this and the dedication of staff towards accomplishing the fundraising piece, because obviously it's the critical piece.
Yep, absolutely.
So Mr. Bear?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. At this point, we'll continue with Virginia leading the project, although we'll be looking to see if we can obtain some additional resources to support her in these efforts.
And could you explain what those additional resources might be, how you see doing that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, there may be an opportunity to look at interns or additional support that could provide some assistance to Ms. McLeod as she pursues the funding.
Okay, I guess the message, Mr. Mayor, may I make the comments now?
Go ahead.
I think the message is really clear. You know, I expected Councillor Christian to be talking about this one on his list of consent items, but this is a project the council wants to see happen, and we want to see it happen this year. So the funding is critical, and I guess that I would just hope that Mr. Barry would be able to find some dedicated staff resource to support the application, because that's huge, and I think there's going to be some local phone calls and things to be made. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll be at a groundbreaking within the next year or so.
Okay, anybody else on the splash pad? On the splash pad, Councillor Mano, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some time ago when this matter came up, I was often against the idea of the splash pad, and it was simply because of the cost. I think given everything that's gone on in this community in the last while, perhaps we need something like this, I've seen a lot of positivity surrounding the idea. So perhaps I may be prepared to or be inclined to support the idea of the splash pad. But I do have one major reservation. My concern is not with the building of a splash pad. My concern is with the location. Right now, when I look at the distinction of Bellevue Park versus Clergue Park, I see one tremendous opportunity, and I understand from what I saw in the documentation, it's going to be more expensive to put it at at Clergue Park than it will be at Bellevue Park. I recognize that is the cost is certainly a factor. There's also going to be fewer parking spaces. But when I look at our strategic plan, and I look at something that we've all been talking about for a very long time here as a council, something that came up when we were in elections. It's been something that we've all continually spoke about. There's significant material on it on our agenda tonight. It's downtown revitalization. If we're going to do any kind of an investment into something like this, I think it belongs downtown. I think that's the most effective way for us to promote what is in our strategic plan. If you look at our quality of life pillar, one of the main points within it is vibrant downtown areas. And then under the focus areas, under quality of life, vibrant downtown areas, we say specifically we're striving to create a vibrant and attractive downtown that contributes to the vitality and resiliency of our city. Downtown areas play a central role in defining the character of our city. We spent considerable time talking about this. I understand that parking isn't as ideal. I understand that cost will be a bit more. It's not significantly more. I think we need to give something back to our downtown. We cut out a water fountain at our budget over, it cost $24,000 a year out of our downtown, and look at the reaction we got from our community. I think this would go a long way to bringing more youth into the downtown. I think it would go a long way to bringing some more foot traffic in the downtown. Even where there is a lack of parking in some circumstances, you're going to have more people driving around in the area. So I would support this if we were looking at bringing into downtown, because at least it fits into our strategic plan and it fits into something that we all want and we all need in this community, and that's to do something significant to improve our downtown. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to Councilor Christian. I think you had made an indication you'd field the question. I think there was a lot of work and time and effort done in discussion about where this would be located, so I'll let you.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I was about to go there. With all due respect to my colleague, Councilor Romano, I couldn't disagree with you more. And I do mean that with the utmost respect. And to the Mayor's point, a lot of time and effort went into looking at these two locations. I think first and foremost, and not losing sight of the fact that we need to revitalize the downtown core. Agreed, we need to do that, but it doesn't mean that the splash park has to be the answer. There's many things that we can do. And to simply say that the splash park doesn't go in Bellevue Park for all the right reasons, simply to put it in the downtown core because it's been identified that we need to do something there, would be a huge mistake. Everything that went into evaluating the locations took into account a business plan, a business model. There's nothing in the location at the downtown location that is more beneficial than Bellevue, save and except that if you put it in Bellevue, you don't have it downtown. That's the only difference. Cost-wise, it's much cheaper to build at Bellevue Park. You already have infrastructure there. If you build at Clergue, you're going to have to put in facilities. You're going to have to put in change facilities. You don't have any. You don't have any support facilities there whatsoever. You've got the store that's right there, and more importantly, you already have an infrastructure there with swings and everything else that kids access. You can turn. You have to be somewhat. Well, actually, I don't think you need to be a visionary at all. It takes some common sense to realize that if you've already got swings and you have all that play equipment there, it only makes sense to put the splash park there because now you're providing a full day of activities for kids. That's what young people want. And if we're really going to try to service the community, we have to think that way. You're going to have a splash park, you're going to have swing sets, you've got the greenery there, you have concessions there. You already have a building that just needs to be retrofitted to act as a change facility. Everything's there. To do otherwise, I think would be doing a disservice to the community. We're simply saying that we're going to spend all this additional money in a place that it is ill-advised simply because we have conflicting interests somewhere else. I understand we need to do something downtown, but the committee studied this in great detail, and I think we would be making a huge mistake if we opened this up at all to any further discussion as far as location goes. It creates critical mass at Bellevue Park. It's a wise thing to do. It's a smart way to spend the money, and families will want this. If you don't do it, they're going to swing at Bellevue Park, get warm, get in their vehicles, drive to downtown, use the splash pad, and that makes no sense at all. You might as well keep them in one location and make good use of Bellevue.
Councillor Krampotic.
Just a comment, Mayor Provenzano.
Sure.
I just want to thank Virginia and the staff for an excellent report, and I certainly support the location, and I certainly support the resolution. And what's it going to do? It's going to end up bringing young people and their families, and they're certainly going to enjoy it in the area. It's good for our youth, and it's good to keep our youth into the city, and it gives an attraction for them to attend. Geez, I can remember when I was a young 5 years old, and I was at Bellevue Park, and I was at a splash park. That's how long it goes back, but I'm fully supportive of it. And, you know, as far as the fundraising goes, if I can help in any way with Virginia and the team to give some ideas on fundraising, more than welcome to help out.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to thank Councillor Myers and Councillor Christian for their work on this, recognize Virginia for her work, and I know that PRAC was involved and there was a lot of committee work, so thank you all. Councillor Nero, I believe you're on PRAC. So thank you for all the councillors who put their time and effort into moving this forward. Any further comments on the splash pad? Seeing none, we'll move on. So, Councillor Myers, are you then done with your matters in the consent agenda? One more. Go ahead, please.
The outdoor patios, downtown patios, I should say, 6.14.
So is Dawn taking the questions on this? Because I do see Victoria Proust in the audience. Dawn, are you taking the questions on this?
Yes, I am, unless I need assistance.
Okay, so Ms. Proust is here for assistance.
Victoria likes that. Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, because I imagine it was Tori that took some of these photographs or put them in the presentation, but that's okay, you can answer them, Don. There's just, when I read through this, and it's fantastic, it's great, it's fresh, it's exciting, it's all the things that we need to have happen with our downtown, and it's really a great signal. So support it strongly. The one photograph looked as if actually the sidewalk was obstructed. There's one photograph. I don't think that the sidewalk is intended to be obstructive by the patios. There was one, I think it might have been from Sudbury. It was one where it looked like there was a bit of a fencing or whatever that was part of the patio that continued right up abutting to the building in the photograph, unless the photograph just wasn't clear in what we received. But point being that there is accessibility right along the sidewalk, correct? Even with a patio there?
Mr. Mayor, we've clearly identified a question I need assistance with.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ms. Proust, why don't you just come up to the microphone and...
I should pull it up and give you the picture, but you might have it there, Tori.
Page 72.
I didn't bring it up in front of me. I was still on Splash Park. So there was one photograph. We don't have it up on the screen, right?
No,
It's not up there.
I think
Okay.
she's got the photograph you're asking about, Councillor Myers.
Yeah, it looks as if it goes right up to the building, correct?
Yeah.
But that's not the intention, correct? Because in the report, in the text, it refers to the sidewalks would still be accessible. Obvious accessibility for people in a wheelchair or elderly is quite an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sidewalks will still be accessible, though one of the regulations to have a licensed patio in Ontario is that the licensed area front the building, so it has to be adjacent to the building. And so figure one, what the picture that you're referring to is how Sudbury has dealt with that. Some of our sidewalks were limited in terms of the space that we have with the parking bays, and so what we're proposing in the report is to allow this decking structure to be created that will still maintain accessibility, maintain that 1.5 meters that is required by the Accessibility Act. to allow restaurants to implement licensed patios on our sidewalks.
Okay, because when I looked at figure 1, which was Sudbury, as I thought I
Yeah.
recalled, then figure 2 shows a different style, and it
Yep.
looks
So
quite
this
open.
this is a non-licensed.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
non-licensed,
Yeah.
that's the difference, okay.
And you'll
then-
notice there's no fencing or anything either, so.
No, and
yeah.
then figure 3 is a rear patio, so that
Yeah.
wouldn't be the issue because it's not a sidewalk. So if I understood you correctly, just for the sake of our folks that are listening, sidewalks will be accessible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. The licensed and the unlicensed ones.
Yeah.
Any other questions from Mr. McConnell that he will direct to Mrs. Prowse? Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned, Tori, accessibility. Both Councilor Butler and I know we'll get the questions at the next meeting about was the accessibility committee involved in this process at all?
Nancy Scott was. So the committee itself, we didn't bring it to the committee, but we've had meetings with Nancy, and she's seen the guide, and she's comfortable with it.
And just to follow up, I would maybe encourage you after we approve it tonight to maybe come to I think you've been there before.
Oh, no, I haven't,
Yeah,
but
the
love to come.
Maybe you can come at the next meeting, which is coming up
Sure.
pretty soon, and maybe present this to our accessibility committee. Thank you.
We have Councilor Shoemaker, then Councilor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Prowse. There's a paragraph in the summary that talks about requiring the authorization of a neighboring property if you're going to use one of the parking bays. What if a neighboring property doesn't agree?
So if a neighboring property doesn't agree, then like in other situations where we have delegated authority to city staff, that restaurant does have the right to appeal staff's decision to council. And so Mr. McConnell can correct me on that, but what would typically happen is planning staff would write a report explaining why we didn't recommend it, and then they would be able to make their case at council.
Okay, that's good. So there is another avenue, I guess, if two neighbors just can't seem to come to terms on it.
For sure, but we do hope that, this is a really positive thing and it's a conversation, and so we can sort of convince people to take opportunities of these spaces, so.
Well, great report, and look forward to seeing the fruits of it.
Okay, any other questions on that? Yeah, sorry, I apologize. We have Councilor Hollingsworth. I have a list here.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Ms. Prowse. Yes, excellent report. Just one question. I believe I know the answer, but I just want clarification for those at home. So the patios that are being built, great examples you gave us, such as Sudbury, beautiful wooden patio and so forth. I'm assuming that the owner of the establishment is responsible to build
Yep.
under guidelines, under guidance of?
Yep, so what we have proposed in the guidelines is that the restaurant owner will have to have designs done and inspections by a certified building professional. And so even though you don't need a building permit to build this type of structure, they will be following the code, and so I don't see any concerns with that, yeah.
Okay. And one last question. And again, you're hoping that this will be up and running for this summer?
Absolutely, yeah,
And
yeah.
not to put you into a corner, but approximately when are you hoping to see these patios come to life, and what would the period of time be?
We're opening it up to May 15th to October 1st. I've been in contact with 3 restaurants in our downtown, and so we're sort of working through the process, and hopefully this, after we vote on this, they can get their applications in right away. And so from our perspective, it would really be the liquor licensing that would be the rate determining step for them. Mm-hmm. But if May 15th comes and they're not yet licensed, they can certainly open up unlicensed, provided that they get the insurance and all the necessary regulations that we've asked for. So, yeah, and we hope to have more than 3. So after this, hopefully that'll build.
This is very exciting because it's going to be the second year. I think Councillor Myers can confirm this to the wonderful cars. They help me out with
The Queen Street Cruise.
Queen Street Cruise. This is wonderful. Again, well done. And maybe we can take it one step further, have some volleyball nets downtown or basketball or something, and a little bit of beach sand or something. So this is really good. Well done. I support it.
Okay. So, Councilor Fata.
Just a couple of quick questions for Mr. McConnell. From your standpoint, I just want your opinion on this. Like, do you think that there's no red tape involved in this process, that the way it's been set up, that restaurants and bars and so on will be very attracted to this plan? Like, I'm just concerned about the costs and all the implications that they'll have to incur, you know?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, what we did, and to say that we've eliminated red tape, where government's involved, we're never going to eliminate red tape. I mean, we do need to have some of that. But what we have worked is to simplify and standardize the process. Those people who have been involved with it, those people that Ms. Prowse has talked to, they understand it. It's a lot simpler than it has been in previous years. In the first year, there's actually no cost that they're providing to the city. We are using standardized forms, so in a lot of ways, I think there's a savings in staff time in this as well. We're very enthused about it, actually.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. The other, the question I have is this. So a typical Saturday afternoon, it's a beautiful day in mid-June, and all the restaurants and bars have these patios set up. If the stores that have, say, clothing, sporting goods, et cetera, do they have to go through any criteria? If they just decide to have sort of a sidewalk sale, can they just go out there and just utilize the sidewalk, or do they got to go through a process?
No, they would not go through the process. This is dealing with people who are going to establish a patio, and it's going to be there for 5 or 6 months. And there is legal liability issues associated with the city. That's what this process was designed for. With regards to other people using the sidewalk for other purposes, that's a question that's better answered by legal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, I just want to be clear on that. I know that we're talking strictly about bars and restaurants, but just to make the downtown more active, and would there be a problem as far as other types of stores using the sidewalk, Anula?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Fata, when a store is doing something like that, where they're setting up racks with clothing or whatever on our sidewalk, they usually get a license of occupation, just to ensure that there's proper insurance in case somebody gets hurt, and some of the things that Tori was mentioning earlier, like making sure there's accessibility so people can get around, and that the sidewalk is mostly unimpeded.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else on the sidewalk, what number agenda? What agenda item was that? 6.14. The thing about these things is they time out. No one else on that? Thank you very much, Ms. Prowse. It was a very good report. Thank you very much, Mr. McConnell. Anything else in the consent agenda, Council? Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.4, tax collector appointment.
6.4, tax collector appointment. This will be for our treasurer.
Yes. So, Michelle, if I'm understanding the report correctly, Mr. Liepa's statutory duties are going to be reassigned to an existing staff member within the department, and then a staff member at a lower grade is going to be brought in to fill in sort of the additional duties that Mr. Liepa was performing?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that is correct.
And was there any consideration perhaps given to a gapping of this position, not the statutory aspects of it, but the less statutory aspects of it?
One of you two should answer that. Both of you are grabbing your mic here. I don't care which one of you it is.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Certainly with any position that's being replaced, we look at the possibility of gapping. One of the things that works against that in many cases is that an employee who retires and has an end day of work actually is still using up on some unused vacation, usually, so you end up with a gap if you didn't replace them, or if you replaced them when you stopped paying them out, you would have a gap there anyways. Certainly with this position, it was looked at and it was determined that it was a position that we could not gap.
Okay, so that was done.
Yes.
That is done on every position, but we can have the CEO speak to that now.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Yes, that's done on every, we actually have a form that we have everybody go through to indicate what the position is, whether they can replace, whether they could make it redundant, whether they could reallocate to other positions, and to indicate in terms of overtime costs for not filling the position, et cetera. There's a fulsome process that they need to go through on every position that comes forward for consideration within the organization. Gapping is part of that analysis that takes place for that vacancy management process.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. To Ms. Schell or perhaps City Clerk, Mr. White, or Deputy CAO, Mr. White, once this new lower grade position is sort of in place and doing its his or her tasks sort of routinely, and once Ms. Pascal's position is sort of realized to its full new extent, will there be a job evaluation done on them that could potentially change their job classification?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, certainly when any position is either added and the position, the new quote tax position was an existing or an older position that we did have that hadn't been used for some time. So we had a good basis for what it would do and where it would fit in the grid. That being said, once the position has been in place for at least 6 months, we would look to review it to see if we felt it did need to go through the job evaluation process to give a final determination on where it would sit. As well with Ms. Pascal's position, it's certainly significant duties that we're adding there, and we would need to review that at not earlier than a 6-month period.
For the newer position, I'm not sure, what's the title of the new position, so I don't just keep referring to it as the new position?
The new position is the Assessment and Collection Supervisor.
For the Assessment and Collection Supervisor, I heard you say that there was previously that position, and now we're sort of recreating that position. What level is it coming in at?
It's coming in at level 4, sorry.
Level 4. Yeah. And is that what was recommended by Mr. Nero or someone in our HR department?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, the revised position based on an older position was thoroughly vetted with Human Resources to sort out where it should lie.
But is that the recommendation that came out, or was the recommendation from Human Resources then changed?
I'm not aware of any change from what Human Resources recommended, and Michelle's confirming that. There was no variance with the discussions as to where Human Resources or Finance thought it should be.
Okay. Okay. Well, as long as what's being recommended, in the outside or in the formal process isn't being overridden, I'm happy. Again, I have no other questions, but my only other comment is this is a good reorganization of the department, and I think that it's nice to see a department, specifically finance. This is the second time you've reorganized your department and saved a pile of money for the city as a whole. So it is a good example, and I hope that all departments are taking on the hard decisions that you've taken on and seeing where they can trim costs and trim their staff as these retirements and vacancies come open, because you've really done a great job.
That's it, Councillor Shoemaker. Any other questions on 6.4, comments? Any other questions on consent? Councillor Fata?
To touch on 6.6, I just wanted to find out what the procedure will be now, since the option is there to go from 3 or 5 on the committee. What would be the next step in terms of moving from 3 members to 5 members? Since I've already put my name forward to be the 4th, I'm just wondering, like, what's the procedure to get to 5?
I think we have to do 3 or 5. Mr. White, want to address that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, the report and recommendation before you is to change the composition to 3 or 5. As far as what would determine the composition, whether it's 3 or 5, that would depend on how many members council wish to appoint. You would have the option under this of appointing 3 or 5 members.
I think the fact, if I can add, we couldn't go to 4 because we can't have that number in voting.
I understand that, but if I'm asking this council, how are we going to proceed to 5 members? How we have to open it up for a 5th member, or I guess we have to open up for a 4th and a 5th. I mean, nothing's official, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fat, I will have to look at that for a moment just to see where, I'm not remembering where we left off in January, but I will go to that just if you just give me one moment.
As soon as we're done.
I'm looking back now, and we do have 3 members. I would presume if council approves this tonight, then we will come back with an opportunity for members to be added at a subsequent meeting.
Is that good, Councillor Fred?
By subsequent meeting, are you talking about the next meeting, or are you talking about?
Through you, Mr. Mayor to Councillor, or Mr. Acting Mayor to Councillor Fata, I wouldn't see any reason for waiting longer than next meeting.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Councillor Bruni?
Comment on that. I know Councillor Fata asked to be on the committee, and that would make it 4. So the Finance Committee said that we would have to have an odd number, which is 5, and we're going to hopefully look for another councillor, but I hope council will take Councillor Fata as a serious candidate, because he was the one that first came forward that he wanted to be on the Finance Committee. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions on 6.6? Questions on consent? Appears to be none.
Mr. Acting Mayor, members of council, I have a motion by Councillor Shoemaker, and I'll use Councillor Turco as the seconder. Resolved that all the items listed under date 2017-0320, agenda item 6, consent agenda and addendum, be approved as recommended, save and accept items 6.8, 6.9, and 6.11.
All in favor? That's carried.
Mr. Acting Mayor, members of council, we did have the items separated from consent concerning the fire vehicles. For council's information, there are 2 reports and 2 resolutions on this matter. What I would suggest is that your decision on the item overall will result in you voting the same way for each resolution. Unfortunately, both resolutions need to be voted on. So what I would suggest is that you have the discussion on the issue as a whole, and when we're ready to vote, then I will read each resolution, and you can have a recorded vote on each resolution as was requested.
We just started 6.9.
6.8 and 6.9 fire vehicles.
Okay, we're on 6.9 fire service vehicles. Council, we kind of gone around the horn on this. I'm going to agree with the two most senior councils in the room, Councillor Turco and Councillor Butland at the same time. Frankly, failing a motion to postpone this, I think we should vote on it. Either it passes and they move ahead with the vehicles, or it doesn't pass and they don't move ahead with the vehicles. So I don't see a motion to postpone it. So to me, I don't think there's much less to debate. I think we should just call the vote, and either you're for the purchase or against the purchase. There was a request for a recorded vote. So, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, because of the way this is structured, we'll need to have two votes, one on 6.8, one on 6.9. First on 6.8, a motion by Councillors Hupen and Nero, resolve that the report of the manager of purchasing be received, and that the supply and delivery of the following vehicles, as listed in the resolution and subject to approval of the allocation of the necessary funding, as outlined in the report of the fire chief, be approved. A recorded vote has been requested. Councillor Butland?
For.
Councillor Myers?
Against.
Councillor Bruni?
For.
Councillor Nero?
For.
Councillor Romano?
Against.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Against.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Against.
Councillor Huppinen?
Against.
Councillor Krampotic?
For.
Councillor Christian?
Against.
Councillor Fata?
For.
Councillor Turco?
For.
Mr. Mayor?
For.
Motion passes.
Motion passes.
On the second one, 6.9, a motion by Councillors Huppinen and Turco, resolved that the report of the fire chief be received and that the supply and delivery of 4 vehicles be funded through the 2017 capital budget allocation of $120,000 and additional $6,237.90 from fire capital equipment reserve be approved. Councillor Turco?
For.
Councillor Fata?
For.
Councillor Christian?
Against.
Councillor Krampotic?
For.
Councillor Huppinen?
Against.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Against.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Against.
Councillor Romano?
Against.
Councillor Nero?
For.
Councillor Bruni?
For.
Councillor Myers?
Against.
Councillor Butland?
For.
Mayor Provenzano?
For.
Motion passes.
We're golfing sometimes when we do that. Okay, so what's next, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the next item up would be 8.1, trees on municipal property. If you just give me 1 second to get there. Council, just for your information, the motion was amended very slightly at the request of the mover and seconder. I'll read it out. It's a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Huppinen. Whereas the city is a naturally gifted community that is known for our landscapes and beautiful surroundings, and whereas many of the trees on municipally owned property have been ravaged by the emerald ash borer, and whereas our stock of trees forms part of our natural beauty, now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to report back as to the current status of tree planting in the city and provide recommendations regarding the development of a guideline for municipal property, providing that when a tree is removed from municipally owned land, 2 trees must be planted to replace the tree removed on municipally owned land anywhere in the city.
Just going to point out to council that this is for report backs. There might be some discussions about what it cost and where they would go, but I think we should leave that discussion for when the report comes back. Councillor Shoemaker, I'll let you address the matter first because it's your motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my co-councillor, Councillor Huppinen, for seconding it. Well, everybody knows our city is naturally gifted, naturally beautiful, and this is just, I think, a way of beautifying our city. Obviously, we've lost a lot of tree stock over the past number of years to the emerald ash borer, and that's, caused a slight dip in our beautiful landscapes, and so hopefully this is a way of sort of renewing our tree stock, helping our green image that our city's got, and it beautifies our city. So I hope the report comes back that this is something that's doable and that we're able to get it done.
Okay, so we'll go with Councillor Butland and Councillor Fata.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. It's a good resolution. I called him an interloper when he came to our Green Committee meeting, but of course I didn't mean that. It was appropriate that he did come forward, and I think he, with a resolution like this, it was totally appropriate, and it is in the right committee now that's at the council level. Yes, let's do this if we can. Now, marrying ourselves to saying, cut one down, we're going to plant two. Maybe we can plant three, maybe we can plant four, or to a lesser degree, at least one. But the whole concept, that's what we should do. And the committee has considerable funds, asked the question, and I was pleasantly surprised that we have a considerable surplus. Now the committee has to decide after the report, is this one of our priorities to in fact, do plant some trees? And I hesitate to say FCM, but the Green Municipal Fund may also help us out here. So if we could put together a kind of a comprehensive tree planting. Sault Ste. Marie, it's been a long time since we were declared the forestry capital of Canada, so this may be a start to reclaim our title. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Fata?
As a follow-up to Councillor Butland, I was just going to say that I'm going to vote in favor of this report coming back to council, but if in the end we're going to vote to replace one tree by two trees, I would vote against that. I think the fact that it just seems like we're looking for an excuse to spend funds that we don't have.
That'll probably be the first time someone's accused Councillor Shoemaker of looking for an excuse to fence funds that we don't have.
Anyway, if we're going to ask for a report, that's fine, but to leave it as replacing one tree with two trees and making that a flat, outright expectation, I totally don't agree with that. Thank you.
Okay, you reserve the right to vote against it. Councillor Myers?
Oh, tough to follow that. I'm also on the Green Committee, Mr. Mayor, and as Councillor Butland, our chair of the Green Committee, just said, we have ample funds in the Green Committee reserve, Councillor Fata, that are there to be able to use for a project like this, and it's an excellent thing to do. And I will say Susan Hamilton Beach is on our Green Committee, and she said we're pretty well there already doing this. So it's simply just to make the guideline official as part of our procedures, but it's not a deviation by any means from what we're really pretty well already doing now, as the report will likely show us. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hupinen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to maybe suggest that we tie into the Canada 150 celebrations this year. Maybe we could promote that everybody plant a tree to celebrate Canada 150, and that would be a good incentive and reasonably priced, not too costly for everybody. So just wanted to throw that in. Thank you.
Okay. So all in favor of the motion? Carried.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this brings us to the bylaws section. Bylaw 2017-52 needs to be dealt with separately due to Councillor Turco's pecuniary interest. So I have a motion by Councillors Hupinen and Nero, resolved that bylaw 2017-52 being a bylaw to appoint municipal law enforcement officers to enforce the bylaws on various private properties and to amend Schedule A to bylaw 9305 be passed in open council this 20th day of March 2017.
All in favor? Carried.
A motion by Councillors Hupinen and Turco, resolved that all bylaws listed under item 11 of the agenda under date 2017-0320 be approved, save and except 2017-45 and 2017-52.
All in favor? Carried.
A motion by Councillors Hupinen and Nero, resolved that this council proceed into closed session to discuss 1, a proposed disposition of property, and 2, a labor relations or employee negotiations matter. And further be it resolved that should said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matters without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councillors Hupinen and Nero, resolved that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried.